Hello, everyone. This is Niroshan Madampitige, an agile coach and an agile delivery expert. Today, I have a very special guest, a guest who can help us to clear all our doubts in terms of change management or process reengineering. Now, when I talk about her, I came across her name when I wanted to read a famous book on value stream mapping. So I went on to Amazon, pulled, did a search, quick search, and then I got the top search result to be the book written by Karen. So our guest for the day is Karen Martin, who is the co-author of Value Stream Mapping, the famous Value Stream Mapping book, and also the author for other books. So I'm gonna invite Karen, and I'm gonna bring her on the screen.
Hello.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. How are you?
Hi. How are you doing? I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you for having me on the show. This is wonderful.
Absolutely, it's my privilege to have you because you are the author of the book that I read a few years ago, actually, right? When I actually wanted to learn value stream mapping, that for a quick implementation that I was asked to do in one of the companies that I worked for. So the book really helped to grasp the knowledge about it, right? It's very concise, it is very strategic, and really helped me. And I'm sure the entire discussion, the 1 hour discussion that we're going to have with you today, will be great for our audience who are watching us and listening to us from YouTube and LinkedIn. So Karen, as a check-in, I would love to hear from you. Tell us something about you. Who is Karen Martin?
Thank you. Well, business-wise, I guess I'll start with business. Business-wise, I started building operations back in the 80s, and I just loved it. I loved, getting streamlined processes and being able to perform and help a team perform at very high levels. And so I just decided that operational excellence was where I wanted to spend my life. Now I do a lot of operations work, but we also get into strategy and even sales and marketing and product development and things like that as well. And so I was a Deming fan for W. Edwards Deming, the father of total quality management movement. And then in 2000, learned about lean. Then it was called lean manufacturing, only in manufacturing. And now, of course, lean management has, gotten into all industries and government as well. And so I absolutely love helping people succeed and excel at everything they do, and companies.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, even when I actually reached out to you proposing about the talk, I mean, you were pretty flexible. You were reception about it, right? It wasn't. I felt like it was all about value, and you deserve to be talking about value proposition. Value creation. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So, while we will try to jump into the discussion, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. People joining us from LinkedIn as well as from YouTube. So, if you do have any burning questions in terms of value stream mapping or process reengineering / change management, drop them in the comment section. We're gonna pick them during the discussion, and there are a lot of great questions lined up to ask from Karen. I'm sure the answers that Karen is going to give us will enlighten us, will definitely help us to navigate through some of the challenging situations we face in change management. Also, optimizing the value proposition in the organization that you work for. All right. So let's get started now. Karen, now this is where I want to start. Right now, everyone's buzzword nowadays is value. if you look at the industrial revolution that has happened over decades, right? There was a time we totally talk about the processes, right? That was a time where every organization, starting from startups to big enterprises, thought processes is the thing, right? So that was a time every organization started implementing strict processes and procedures, and insisted that everyone should adhere to those strict processes, because the belief was that if you get the processes right, you get everything else right. Yeah. In that era, I see there was a big gap in terms of this term, that is value. And I haven't heard such organization talk about value, this particular term, quite often, because they were totally focusing on the processes and perfecting their procedures. Now, my first question is this: how can you define the value in the world of competitive markets and organizations who are trying to innovate and do things as perfectly as possible? What is value for you?
So value is first and foremost determined by customers. And we're talking about external customers to the organization, whether it's a good or a service that's being provided. The customer defines what they value. And you don't get 100% agreement among every single customer in an organization what they value. But there are two ways to determine. One is, does the customer require? If they require something, then it is value by definition. The second thing is, if a customer knew the incremental cost of that amount of work that you're doing, would they be willing to pay for it if they knew the incremental cost? And so you use that as another determinant of whether something is of value. And then thirdly, and finally, there's a kind of foundational bucket of value that all customers do share, which is that they don't want to be harmed and they want to feel good as they're using the good or the service. And so there's an emotional component to it as well. And all three of those together form this definition of value through the eyes of an external customer. So you have to ask external customers what they value.
Okay, so would you mind just putting those three words down straight? What are the three things that you mentioned?
The first thing is customer requirement. Second thing is they would be willing to pay for it if they knew the incremental cost that went into the price that they're paying for the good of the service. They'd be willing to pay for it. And they say, yes, I like that. That's of value to me. And the third is that it's safe and they feel good as they're using the service or the good.
So that's the emotional aspect you said.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Great insights. Yeah, so I totally agree, right? So it's not always just giving what we have put down as requirements, right? So I think particularly the third aspect is very crucial. And this is a kind of first time I'm hearing it as a very key component of value definition. Great to know. Thanks for the wisdom.
You're welcome. One thing about being an author is the book is out of date the minute it goes to press. And so, you keep thinking, you're experimenting and you keep thinking. And so, those three elements are not in the book because, we weren't thinking exactly that way back then. But, it's as you do this work more and more, then you evolve your thinking. And so that's the problem with codifying a thought process into a physical book or an ebook. It's out of date the minute it goes to press.
Totally agree. Yeah. Again, thanks for the insights. And now that leads to another question. Now, of course, why I wanted to ask about this question, the definition of value is to initiate the discussion about the change management. Now, whenever any organization come up with a set of strategic goals, of course, there is a change involved, right? Because every goal has to deal with a lot of dynamics around the environment, right? So it might be on the finance, it might be on the delivery aspect, it might be on the other support processes like recruitment, HR, whatnot, right? Now, in every context, we got to deal with changes. We got to deal with change management. My next question is, let me get that on the screen. So in your experience, can you think of the top 2 challenges that you have faced personally in implementing change?
When I saw the question, I said, "Only 2?" there are many challenges, but I will pick the top 2. Okay. So I would say that the first is leadership appetite and readiness for change. Right. And I'm going to sneak in a corollary there: leadership alignment. So you could have an executive team or even a middle management team be vastly misaligned on what needs to be done and why, and priority. And so, you have to get alignment across the whole leadership team in order for the people that are going to be doing the actual improvement to be able to do it and to manage change accordingly. So leadership is absolutely key in having smooth change management. The second thing is, and I mentioned it a little bit in the first one, is prioritization. So way too many organizations are trying to do too many things at one time. And what they need to be doing is doing fewer things at one time and get them done well. And so a lot of, my third book is The Outstanding Organization. And I talk a lot about chaos. And, there's so much chaos that gets produced in organizations that's, people made because we're trying to get so many things done at once. And, there's a pipeline and you can only get so many things through the pipe at one time without making people crazy and having a lot of chaos. And so prioritization becomes absolutely essential in getting an organization to be able to absorb change well and absorb it more and more quickly as time goes on because of the practice. So limiting how many things you're doing at one time becomes absolutely critical.
All right. Yes. I love your insights, Karen. Now, I totally agree. Particularly the first one. Now, if I just talk about my mandated role, I'm an agile coach, and when I try to coach, in most of the cases, actually, the biggest challenge, the topmost challenge that I face is what exactly you said as the first one, right? Because wanting to be great, I don't see the leadership is very well aligned with that, right? So I mean, it's understandable that there can be challenges around having the right setup, but we need to be really transparent about the issues that we have, particularly when we are not aligned to what we are trying to do, because it can cost millions, right? But the problem might be we are not aligned to get the results done. So that's a mythical belief that if we groom the teams, if we give everything that the team needs, we can get to the place where we want to be. I think up to a level, yes, but without having the proper alignment, it's almost impossible to implement strategic changes.
That's why. I'm sorry. That's why value stream mapping is so helpful, because it's typically a senior leadership team that creates the value stream map, and you're creating a strategic view of the improvements that need to happen over an entire value stream. You're not getting into the weeds yet and into process level improvement. And a lot of people want to just jump right into the weeds and design processes at that level without leadership alignment. So, the value stream map, it's not about the map. It's about the conversation and the alignment that you gain across a leadership team on which are the improvements that need to be made first, second, third, fourth across a value stream. And it's wickedly powerful to get that level of alignment across an entire leadership team.
Yep. Thanks for that. Yeah. So looks like we have a few questions. Are you in a position? Let me bring that on the screen, Karen. So Archie Singed. Thanks, Ajay, for your comments. Appreciate it. So you have a question. Let me bring that into the screen. Let me get this here. Okay. His question is how to create value stream chain in lean software development. So we will get to that, Karen, very shortly. Before we get into the creation of the value streams, so I have quite a few critical questions that we need to clear out. Yeah, just to understand what exactly we are trying to get done through value stream mapping. So Ajay, wait for it. We're going to definitely touch base on it, right? Yeah, so with that, let me see whether we have any more comments. It's again from Ayo. Ayo says, so let me bring that. I think it's one of your colleagues, maybe. Question to Karen, how do you get leaders to align? Yeah, so now we spoke about the challenge. Now he's asking how can we get them aligned?
Yeah, so if we're talking about value stream alignment, then what happens during the current state, very, very often, senior leaders really don't understand how the whole value stream operates. And when you've got not one person in the entire organization that can, with some degree of accuracy, define how value is delivered to a customer, that is a problem. But leaders are very good with their own functional areas and knowing, their piece of the value stream, but they're not usually very aware of what happens upstream and downstream, especially. So during current state, what happens is you're already starting to get their minds moving in the same direction because they're starting to see the truth about the current state as it actually is. Not how anyone wishes it were, not how you've designed it to be, but how it actually operates. And so that right there starts aligning leaders. Then when you get to the future state design and you've already surfaced all of the barriers to flow, and you've already seen the quality problems and things like that in the current state, when you're in the future state design, we often as facilitators play mediator. And so there may be differing views on what to do to make an improvement, whether work should move one way or another way. And you have to work through that and get them to come to a point of consensus. And consensus does not mean 100% agreement. Consensus means 100% commitment to the decision. And so you as a facilitator, you're working the leaders into that place of commitment, and then that way you have a very strong alignment and a good path forward, so that they're not going to say no, we're not doing that. They've already agreed.
All right, thanks for that.
They've already committed.
They're committed to it. Yes. All right. Yeah, thanks for that. Hopefully, Ajay, you are satisfied with that. Yeah. So if you do have further questions, put them in the chat window. We will pick them during the discussion. Now, let's move on to the next question that I have. That is again, why I wanted to ask this question is, let me get the comment out of it. So I do that. Okay. Right. Few seconds. Right. So the third question, why I wanted to ask this particular question is, does this contradiction around these two terms, right? Now, if you look back, what we had few decades ago, before value stream mapping came into the picture, was mainly business process reengineering, right? So it sounds great. Yeah, so it gives the meaning of what we are trying to do as well. Now, my question is, Karen, just tell us, are they the same? Business process reengineering and value stream mapping talk about the same thing, or are they two different things?
Good questions. So the way we view the difference in those two terms is the level of granularity that you're looking at the work. So a value stream view is a macro level view. So it's a high, like 30,000 foot view of the work. So think of being a helicopter hovering over a very complicated highway system. From the helicopter, you can see where you've got things jammed up, and you can see where you have open highway. When you're down in the car on the road, you're now at a process level. and you can only see a little bit, ahead of you, behind you, and to the side. And so it's a micro view. Business process reengineering, in my view, is typically referring to that micro view at the process level. But all value stream transformation needs some degree of process level improvement in order to get the improvements to affect the value stream. So, the term re-engineering, you don't hear quite as much anymore. That was a little more common during the total quality management movement. And now that lean management and agile are the two predominant movements, DevOps to some degree also, it really is more, it's process design. You can call it re-engineering still. It's just getting all the waste squeezed out of a process so that what remains is what the customer values. And that happens to be a faster way to deliver goods and services, and it happens to be a lower cost way. And it happens to also require you to build quality in every step along the way. So it's a marriage of the two, but value stream is macro and process level is micro.
Right. Now, again, just to dig deeper on that. Now, for me, when I say process reengineering, I think the mindset is also somewhat different in certain contexts, right? Now, when you say let's do process reengineering, we might overlook the value creation perspective, right? Because if you can perfect a process, right, that does not mean anything to the clients or the customers. I think there's no point, right? It might be totally an internal thing at times than reaching out to the client with improved value. Yeah, so I mean that's where actually I wanted to ask that question particularly, and great insights again. So got your point.
Yeah. So one more thing about. Can I add one more thing?
Yes, please.
So one more thing about value is very often organizations don't consider the external customer's view of value. And let's even talk about product development and new ways of operating. Very often it's what you have the capabilities current state to do, whether or not the customer values it or not. And so business process reengineering was a very kind of internal view of the work and how it should occur. And this value movement that we're in is a very external view of how work should flow. And it's completely different. And you see waste through a very different lens when you look at it through an external customer's viewpoint.
Absolutely. Yes, totally agree. Yeah, thanks for that. All right, so the next question again, it's so let me get that here. So that's what you see in the slide. So this is about implementing big changes, right? When I say big, I see them as very strategic changes that the organizations have agreed to move ahead. So they are ready to spend a lot of money, right? They are getting the teams ready. They are getting the leadership team formed up. Sometimes in a big scale, right? So they talk about hundreds of employees being brought in order to get those big changes implemented. So my question is, what should be the very first step for such organizations?
Well, so this is another very good question, and it's pretty situational depending on the organization. One thing to think about is that there's the big change bucket of improvements and innovation that you need in an organization, but there's also setting the foundation so that you can be more and more successful. And most organizations have, I call it, a cracked foundation. They don't have all the fundamentals in place that they need to really store and perform at very, very high levels. And so when we work with clients, we kind of work both of those, the foundation as well as the innovative big changes. So when it comes to where to start, we start in both places quickly and clean up the foundational work as well as the big change. But again, with the big change piece, it comes back to leaders being very, very clear about the purpose of the organization, why they exist in the first place, not what they do, but why they do it, and what their priorities are in terms of the strategy that they want to execute over the next several years. And that level of clarity, so Clarity First was my follow-on book to the Outstanding Organization, and that's all about how do you get greater and greater clarity in an organization so that you can perform at that level. And it again starts with leadership clarity about what matters, what the priorities are, and consensus and alignment on that.
All right. Yeah. Great. Okay, so I think I'm just going to quickly move on because these are very much related questions that will answer the next part of the same question, right? Now, from there, let me bring that into the screen. So here's a question, right? So, so the term, it's called BHAG, BHAG, which stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. Now, this is another buzzword that I hear in organization wanting to implement changes, and I have been part of creating such goal, right? So I see a lot of value there. So I just want your opinion on it. Are you someone using that technique? If so, how? If not, what are the alternatives?
Yeah, good. Another good question. So Jim Collins, I think, was the one that coined that term in Good to Great, if I recall. And when we do value stream transformation work, we are, again, looking at both foundational and big innovation. And one of the things that we suggest to the mapping team when we get to future state design is, look, what you don't want to do is you don't want to rearrange the deck chairs on top of the Titanic. You want to, best case scenario, reconstruct the Titanic or do some renovation, some serious renovation. You might want to actually build a new ship. And that's where it gets really innovative, what you want to do with the value stream. So the way we get leaders thinking about those big BHAG kinds of innovation is to say, all right, so your customers have a request. The request comes into the organization, and then you're somehow fulfilling on that request. What are the least number of steps the work would have to flow through in order to deliver the highest value to the customer for the price they're willing to pay? And just think, forget about the current state for a moment. What are the least number of steps that you must do in order to deliver value? And then start with those as the core, and then build around them the degree that you have to do other things because of organizational constraints or regulatory requirements, whatever it might be. You build around those things that are the absolute essential steps. And it usually gets people thinking way more innovatively. Because one thing you want to avoid is solving a problem that you should make go away. If there's a difference between solving and getting better at doing something that shouldn't ever be done at all. And that's what the future state design challenged, people to think very innovatively to get rid of the need for some of the band-aids that have been dragging the organization down.
All right. Yes, totally agree. Now, on that, I totally understand what you're saying. Also, the insight's really helpful. Now, if I want to dig deeper, for me, the big, hairy, audacious goal is after defining the vision, right? So you may have a very high-level vision statement that you want to achieve during your implementation, and then you narrow one level further and then come up with BARG goal, right? And in that, what are the key elements that you suggest tackling in defining the big, hairy, audacious goal? What elements should we look?
What was the word? What were the question was, what are the key, and then I missed that word?
BHAG, like the same thing, big, hairy, audacious goal. So let me get on that screen.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's on the screen, Karen.
Okay.
So is it like, what I'm asking is, what specific elements that you need to include in that goal statement at a high, the high level goal statement that you're setting up?
So let me back up for a moment. When we are starting to work with an organization, and I recommend all the viewers, if you're going to be leading a value stream transformation effort, you need to do this as well. You need to start with a charter. And the charter is not just a piece of paper that you write things on. It actually is a thought starter to defining what those goals that you want to achieve are. And again, the leadership alignment, getting those goals, whatever they may be. So it's what gaps do you have? What problems do you want to solve? Is it a market share problem? Is it a new product altogether that the industry's never seen? Is it a financial problem? Is it all of the above? You have to define the gap, and then that becomes the goal. And those gaps can be huge, or they can. And so the big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAG, are those big gaps that you want to close, and they take, of course, more effort because they're big gaps. But that's the way that we work with organizations, and they sometimes they don't have BHAGs in the first round of improvement of a value stream, because the value stream isn't functioning well and operating well to begin with, and so they've got to get that fundamental work in place so that they can perform, and then they can innovate. So it depends on the organization.
It depends on the organization. So sometimes, based on their goal setting frameworks adapted, we may go with such frameworks as well, right? For example, if it's a smart company who is adapting SMART goals, or something like think big, act small, OKR, right? So maybe we adapt one of these frameworks to what we are doing as well. Yeah. But what you said is, in terms of setting the big set of goals that we want to achieve, coming up with a value stream charter is beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. And we use charters for everything. I mean, it's, no improvement goes into, people actually working on it without a charter of some sort to get clarity and make sure everyone knows what the vision is and what the goals are.
Right. And these charters are kind of agile charters, adaptive, right? Then we are not trying to seal them. So we don't, right? So we are not trying to seal the charter that we are creating at the inception. So it's kind of an adaptive, evolving.
I'm sorry, you cut out just a little bit.
Okay. I'm sorry. So what I'm asking is, now if we follow the traditional approach, we would assume we would try to anticipate every change that we want to do, put that in the charter, get that signed off, and once a sign off is given, we would like to seal it. So it's not the way we work, right? So it's mostly adaptive. So we got to adjust it as and when needed. Is that the way?
Yes, and the key to a really good charter is going into the chartering process, which can take a while to actually get the charter done, is to think about everything as a problem to be solved and not solution based. So at the point you do value stream work, you don't know. Well, actually, most of the time you don't even know what the gaps are until you get into current state design, the full range of gaps. You might know the end performance gap you've got, but you don't know why that exists yet. And so when you're doing the whole chartering up front, you're looking at those gaps from a problem perspective. What problem or what gaps do we need to close? We use problem and gap together, interchangeably.
Right. Got it. All right. Now, okay. So that leads to another question. Now, goal setting. So I'm very particular about goal setting because this is one area we mess up, right? So there's agile way of thinking, agile mindset believes that no planning is no good, or too much planning is neither good, right? So it's an intermediate state where we want to make it an evolving thing, not a just one-off thing, but iterative thing that we have to do continuously until we get to the goals that we have, right? Now, in that process, Karen, my question is, let me get that. Okay, so is this the one? No. Oh. All right, so there's one more. Okay. So this is the question. So my question is, do you have any preferred goal setting framework that you often use? No, I pretty much like OKR, objectives and key results, and I have tried it quite a few times, and but that's one of the frameworks that I really like over everything else that I have learned, right? So I of course use SMART objectives together with OKR. So do you have any preferred goal setting framework?
I've evolved over the years, and I've tried many different methods over the years. And when I was writing Clarity First, I was struck by how I feel like all these different frameworks may overcomplicate the whole subject of setting a goal. And I decided that I wanted to experiment with just two categories: critical to the business and critical to customers, and brainstorm with the team what are the gaps that they feel need to be closed that are critical to the customer and critical to the business. And usually we brainstorm all the gaps, and then start talking about, all right, what are the ones that are the most relevant. And so it's really classic just conversation about which gaps are most relevant. And what you'll find is leadership teams don't agree initially on which are the most important gaps to close. So that becomes part of the exercise, is to get them to align. So sales might say, well, we need to go into 3 new markets. And operations may say, we need to innovate our technology and forget about the markets. And so you have to bring them together. And then at the end of that, once they have the ideas narrowed in on what the goal should be, then they need to be measurable. And so it's a very clear from to. This is current state, this is where we're at, this is where we want to go, and this is the time frame in which we want to get there. And so if it's at a value stream level, they're usually like 6 or 9 month cycles of transformation. 3 months is usually a little too short, and a year, often people get a little sluggish in the beginning and they don't start making the changes. And so 6 to 9 months seems to be kind of the sweet spot, and you decide how aggressively do you want to perform in that period of time. And then that's the goal, those are the goals that go on the charter.
Right. Got it. So your stance is that let's not overcomplicate it. Just figure out the goals without introducing more new tools and frameworks, right?
Yes.
Just look at from start to end. Go deeper into the processes and value streams and figure out what we need to do. That's basically the summation. Is that correct?
Yes, and there's subcategories. So when you talk about critical to customer, it gets back to how they define value. What's critical to them, that what are they not getting right now that they would like to get? So that's a bit of the conversation there. For critical to business, we very much believe in somewhat of a balanced scorecard perspective, but we aren't adhering 100% to that. But it's like, what's critical to the employees? What's critical to the financials? What's critical to the organization from an innovative perspective? You kind of go through all those and then get leadership alignment around the most essential.
All right, great. I love the discussion so far. So let's have a look at. So I can't see the LinkedIn feeds though. Ideally, it should come here. Let me have a glance at LinkedIn as well. So I have one more comment from someone, Adi. Okay, now I see LinkedIn comments. So let's try to bring some of them. Right, so let me take this
off. There's some good questions.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have a few more questions. One from Vinod. Vinod, thanks for joining and asking your question. So Vinod question is this. Can you read that, Karen? I'll go through it. How important to set the value stream mapping in the business transformation to the organization? What are the elements to be considered in terms of creating the value for the organization? So 2 questions.
Yeah, okay. So every organization has at least one value stream that is the way you deliver a good or a service to a customer. Many organizations have many value streams because they have different product lines. And a lot of organizations that are very large can have dozens, if not hundreds, of value streams of products and services being delivered, goods and services being delivered to customers. So the first thing that we recommend is that you identify what are the value streams in the organization. And not only are there those customer value streams, there's internal support value streams. So technology, for example, the whole process of someone submitting an idea for a new technology project to make some improvement that will help the operation, that's a whole big long support value stream in and of itself. The whole hiring and onboarding process, new employee, that's a support value stream, and I can go on. So it's very important to look at work through a value stream lens so that you don't get siloed thinking, and it helps evolve the thinking in an organization so that it's much more holistic and work system related. So I think that value stream mapping has a vital role in business transformation of any sort. I mean, I've been at this for a while, and when I learned about value stream mapping in, I think it was 2001, I was like, it is done well. It is one of the most transformative activities you can take on, both from a leadership thinking perspective and from an actual results perspective.
All right. Yeah. So we have one more question from the audience. I like this question. Maybe this is a question I have also, Karen. Not a difficult one, though. So his question is, yeah. Do you have a way of becoming a certified value stream engineer as well, right? So I see in some organizations who follow lean and scale agile approaches. So we have kind of roles defined, say, in value stream engineer. So can you be certified on that?
I mean, I just am smiling so much about this because we just launched TKMG Academy. And so far we have 4 individual courses, and value stream is not one of them yet because it's a filmed course. We actually go to a studio and film it. And we were slated to film the value stream course the week after the lockdown occurred for COVID in the US. And so we have 3 courses that we're getting back in the studio finally. The second week of July, we're going back into the studio to film all 3 of those courses, and that's one of them. We do want to do some certificate programs for many of our subjects. So you can go on TKMG, which stands for the Karen Martin Group, but we've shortened our company name now to tkmgacademy.com, and you can see the coming soon. And once we get the full library put together, then we will have certificates that you can get, for value stream mapping, for example, and other areas as well. But we just need to get the library. We just launched April 2nd. And so we need to build our library for a few more months.
Perfect timing for the question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, so Adil must be happy, and I know a lot of people because when we posted this about this particular live event, I knew there were a lot of people attracted to it, and I think they are in this session who are actually implementing lean change, applying lean concepts, and they have probably narrowed down to value stream mapping, and this is one of the very prominent tools in lean world, right? And I personally love it. Even I teach in one of the MBAs. it has one chapter called process changing the processes. So I just introduced value stream mapping into it because it's so
Yeah.
valuable to know. Yeah. Okay. So with that, let's move on. So let me get the banner, the comment out. Yes. And the next question I have for Karen is about value streams, actually, right? So although it's about value stream mapping, we never discuss what exactly a value stream is. Can you define it, Karen? What is your definition for a value stream?
Yes, and it's a very good question, and it has evolved over time. So back when the very first book ever written about value streams was called Learning to See by John Shook and Mike Rother, and they observed the way the Japanese, mainly at Toyota, when they were studying them, were creating these really nice, succinct storyboards that show the whole flow of work through this whole work system, the value stream. And so at that point, most people were using value stream to mean from a customer request to delivering on that request. So, it's some sort of an order coming in or a request and then receiving whatever the output of that whole amount of work is. That would be the value stream. Then we started learning about the value of looking at value streams enterprise-wide. So in the case of, I know this is primarily a software development audience, but I want to talk about manufacturing just for 1 minute because it actually is the most tangible example of an extended enterprise value stream. In manufacturing, which, by the way, I'm not a master of manufacturing, I do mainly non-manufacturing work. They have the whole supply chain upfront piece of getting, supplies and materials into manufacturing, which is part of above the order coming in front of the order. And there's product development. And so there's this whole product development, they call it the fuzzy front end. There's this whole product development piece up front also before an order comes in. On the back end, after a product gets shipped, a good gets shipped to customers, oftentimes there's a very big piece of the value stream that's about warranty work, and servicing the good and all that whole customer service. And then there's collect revenue for the good. So a value stream doesn't really only begin at the order and end at delivery. It actually has, beginning and ending things. And when you're scoping a value stream mapping activity, you're scoping it to include the fence post, first process, the last process, based on whatever problem it is you want to close, what gap or gaps you want to close. And so we still use order to delivery, request receipt. Some people say cradle to grave. Some people say ring to ring, like the phone ringing and then the cash register. So it's still that generally, but it doesn't have just that as a clear beginning and end. That makes sense.
Right. Yes, definitely. Yeah, so we have a quick time check. We have just 12 minutes. Let's try to time box it. We have just a few more questions. If the audience has any other questions, please drop them. We'll try our best to answer the questions we have because our purpose here is to deliver value, right? Through the discussion on value stream mapping. Yeah, so if we may add any value to your profession, your job, your organization, let us know. We will try our best to support on that. So with that, the next question is a very simple one, Karen. What should be the value stream team? Who should be involved?
One of the things that when Mike and I were writing our book, Value Stream Mapping, we said, aim as high as you can and accept as low as you need to. And what we mean by that is, the higher the leader is in the organization, the better suited they are for determining future state strategies. And they have the authority to, they can authorize the kinds of strategic changes that the value stream may require. So the team is the same team for both current and future state. The bias that you use when you're forming that team is toward the future state, because you want the people that do indeed have the organization-wide view and the authority to say yes to the future state improvements that need to be made. The way you get the current state information is from people closer to the work. And so there's both homework up front that you can do to get data and information up front from the people who actually do the work. And we often walk the value stream. Now, this is pre-COVID. When you do mapping in person, you walk the value stream and you actually are walking from process to process and interviewing the people who do the work to get some of the details, especially from a metric perspective. You want to understand time it takes and the quality of what they're getting and all those things. We're now walking the value stream virtually, so it's a surrogate workplace, and so it can still be done, but that's the other way doing work. The team, though, is still biased for as high a level of implementation as you can get.
Right. So in that team, do you also recommend someone like value stream engineer? Now, to give a bit of context to that, so I see, most of the agile organizations who want to implement scaled agile practice. That means, they have bigger teams. They have more than just few teams. So it's like, hundreds and, sometimes thousands of employees working together, and they are agile teams. Now,
right.
Pretty much, all these teams will work towards one or few products, right? So what they're trying to do is they tend to define key value streams for them to work on. For example, we might say this is our primary value stream, our primary focus on the desktop version, right? Ensuring that these customers are happy. There can be another support value stream or secondary value stream on the mobile support, right? I'm just taking it as an example. Now, in that case, actually, what they do is appoint value stream engineers and give them a very particular value stream that they should manage with the team. So, is it a common practice, or is it a kind of a one-off practice?
So we very much believe in having value stream, managers. You can use whatever term you want, that really watch the entire value stream, because in most organizations, people are watching different verticals. They're not watching the whole work system. And so we very much believe it's pretty rare to get a client to agree to it, because they're so fixed and they have such a long-standing organizational structure that's function-based, that they have a hard time understanding how you could assign someone the authority over the value stream, the entire value stream, who doesn't have all those, they don't have line authority for all those functional areas. And, it kind of mystifies me, because you don't have to have an org chart to do the right thing. I mean, you can just manage the work in a different way and not even touch your org chart. But organizations seem to be like really kind of hung up on those direct line, and so we have a hard time getting organizations to break that old thinking into value stream managers. Customers don't buy pieces of a product in function. They buy a product, and it's a work system. And so it's just kind of, I don't know, it's one of the more frustrating things about trying to introduce this kind of thinking into an organization is breaking those long-standing paradigms about functional work and how it's organized.
Totally agree, Karen. Totally agree. I'm with you, because I mean that reminds me about one situation. This is hilarious. Just listen to me, right? Quick story. In one instance, to implement 5 minutes code change, that's a software code change, 5 minutes of effort, it took more than a week to get to the production, because there was a huge bottleneck in the that approval perspective, right? Because it has to go through a change approval board that meets once or a few times a week, right? So we have to cache them like a train. We have to cache a train. If you miss it, you miss it until the next one.
Right.
And also, once it's approved, then those who actually have to do the deployment was DevOps, right? Few guys working for a big organization, so they are bottleneck. So again, it's spot on what you said. I think it's very important to look at the overall improvement perspective, right? So just narrowing down to one or few processes without looking at the end result will not take us anywhere.
Well, and the approval process in software it happens all across the value stream in the traditional way of thinking. And there are so many ways to get consistent approvals that meet consistent criteria that don't require a weekly meeting. Therefore, the first thing that you have to do is do the hard work to define with absolute clarity what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And that takes a little bit of time to figure that out, but you put it on paper, and that becomes the standards by which work occurs. And then the other thing is, then you can have an exception-based approval instead of everything going through the approval. Then you just have criteria for the few things that are tricky. And you maybe, you're doing something for the first time and you don't know if you want to approve it or not. Those kinds of things, but then you codify that decision and you put it into a standard. So you can standardize decision making a lot more than people think.
All right. Yes. Thanks for that. Totally agree with that. So we are close to the end, but we have a few questions. Karen, are you okay to extend it by a few minutes, maybe 10 more minutes?
Yeah, I can stay on for
so that we can answer the audience questions as well. So now I have one question from one of my peers, actually, Rumesh. From Rumesh, he's one of the core trainers. We train together. So let me pull his question. Here it is. So let me read it. Capturing value additions and non-value activities at each step of an operation value stream. Any tips on recording these and quantifying them? It's basically about the value adding and non-value adding activities. So his question is around quantifying them, tracking them, and then how do you quantify them?
Yeah, so it's a great question. At the value stream level, we probably only get into discussions about value adding and non-value adding 50% of the time, 50. And it's because at a value stream, you're very, very macro level. So we see a lot of value stream maps that look like process maps to us. And we, there's a very clear difference in our view. And so at the macro level, when you're at a true value stream level, most of the process blocks, because there are chunks of work, and then there's a handoff, chunks of work, and then a handoff, chunks of work. Most of those have both value adding and non-value adding embedded within that process. So it only is when you drop to the process level as the second stage of improvement that you're starting to really pay close attention to value adding and non-value adding. Now that said, there are many value streams where you have a handoff to an approval, an approval in the process at a value stream level. That's clearly non-value added. In the eyes of an outside customer, no customer would agree to pay for an approval. They want the work to be done right the first time. They want the work to flow, and so there are entire blocks in a value stream that we'll put an X over because that entire block needs to come off as non-value adding. But we get into it and we quantify it mostly at a process level, not at a value stream level. And we quantify the amount of savings the organization's getting from removing those non-value adding activities. We quantify it. We use the term process time. So we add up all the process time that's being saved by removing it. And that's freed capacity, the term we use.
All right. Yes. Thanks for that. So quite exciting, at least for me. Hopefully you would like this question as well. So let me bring that onto the screen. So this sounds like everyone's problem. So the question is how to improve value and minimize the waste in legacy environments. So
yeah, so this is going to sound a little sassy maybe, but the first thing that you have to do is you have to get people to recognize that it is a legacy environment. I mean, you have to have the conversation about to what degree do you want to keep doing the work the way you've always done it, and to what degree do you want to innovate and do things in a more efficient and effective way. And if you can't get leaders to have the intestinal fortitude and appetite for moving away from legacy and toward a better way of working, you can't really get much done. And it's that's why you have to start with leadership. You know, you can do micro improvements that the front lines have control over, and you can get those done, but that's not going to fundamentally change organizational performance, and it's not going to fundamentally improve the workplace from an employee perspective, and it's not going to fundamentally change the way you're delivering value or not delivering value to a customer. So it really, again, you know, I can't emphasize enough that, I mean, my heart goes out to people who are internal who can't get the leadership ear to have these conversations, because it is very difficult to get substantive change in place without leadership agreeing to it in the first place.
Totally agree. So let me, yes. Okay, so last few questions. Let me get a few more questions from the audience. So we have another question from Ayo Adenchi. Thanks for joining and thanks for the question. So Karen, the question is this. With value stream mapping, are there organizations or teams that cannot implement it? All right.
Okay. Done well, no. Done not well, yes. So what I mean by that is you know, you have to go slow to go fast. And going slow means taking a lot of time up front to get leadership aligned around the value stream improvement effort to begin with. And then during the actual mapping, when you get to the future state design, we use briefing, and we bring in other people that aren't on the mapping team to hear what the mapping team is proposing. And we try to work through any disagreement that there might be about that future state right then and there. Because if you don't handle it during the mapping, when everyone's focused, what happens is after the mapping, once the future state's designed, then you have to go through and sell it to people, lobby for the change. And when they haven't been there for the discussion and see the transformation from the future, and even understand why the current, you know, why future is needed, because the current doesn't look so good, it's very hard to sell a concept when you have had that level of involvement. So the teams that are unsuccessful implementing are typically teams that are, you know, falling victim to the fact that leaders weren't involved as they should have been in the beginning in order to sell the future state design. Very difficult to sell it after mapping.
Right. All right. So one more question, Karen. So Achilles quite keen in getting an answer for this. So he reminded me for the second time. So the question is, by the way, thanks for the question, Akhil, appreciate it. The question is, how many organizations in software enterprises use the value stream mapping being done systematically you would want to have? So have you worked with, yeah?
So I think value stream perspective is really important in any business. I think it's particularly important when you can't see the work so easily. You're visualizing something that's, you know, resonant in a computer and heavily people-based. And so I long have believed that value stream mapping, while we learned it from manufacturing, it's way more powerful outside of manufacturing because of the nature of work not being so highly visible. And we do a fair amount of value stream work in software development because it's, you know, there's a lot of pain in software development that's unnecessary. And pain equals both emotional pain in the staff and a customer, but it's also cost. You know, if it takes a long time to get work done because it's buggy and you got to go back and recode and those things, that all costs money. Even if it's a salaried employee, it costs money because it costs time. And so it's very, very helpful in every single software organization or software, you know, the tech department within organizations that aren't classically a tech company. Everybody should be doing that. It's powerful work.
Right, right. Okay. Akhil, hope you are happy with the answer. So with that, I think, I'm gonna just ask you two more questions, Karen, no more than two.
Okay.
So, when I looked at the list of the questions, there are quite a few, but, we will not be able to go through everything. So let me pick up two things, two more questions. The next question is this. So you see it in the slider. Let me get the comment off. All right. So here's a question: how to improve value and minimize? So sorry, I asked that question. Okay, so this one actually, one next to it. So it's I think it's somewhat answered. So it's particularly asking about banking IT environment. I think when I hear banking, I see that there are a lot of legacy systems around.
Yeah. Yeah, banking is particularly behind the curve on innovative thinking and value stream thinking. Again, it comes down to understanding what the customer's true requirements are, what they want from an ease perspective, and whether or not they're willing to pay for the amount of work. Now, checks and balances are very, very prevalent in banking because of the regulatory environment everywhere. And so you have to just really, some of those are necessary and required, and there's not much you can do about the requirement, but there's always something you can do to meet the requirement more efficiently and effectively, always. And so, yeah, and a lot of people get kind of, their heels dug in and say, no, it's a requirement. But the requirement is for you to deliver to this level of quality or time, sometimes of timeliness. It's not saying how specifically every little detail you do that. And so there's a lot you can do. And a value stream will surface all those big delays in the banking process, whatever the value stream is you're looking at, it'll surface that visually. And seeing it in a storyboard fashion is very powerful. It's so much easier to see the truth of a situation visually than talking about it.
Very true.
And leaders have very big decision shifts when they see the value stream on a piece of paper. It's powerful.
Totally agree. So I mean, this question is very relevant to me because I used to be working for a bank for about 9 years. So I think there are quite a lot of challenges that they face in terms of introducing lean mindset, things like value stream mapping, and it also might boil down to the very first challenge that you spoke about, right? Misalignment in the way we work and also the way we leadership, etc., right? So that there are a lot of things that you have to get right.
And the other thing I would just add in here, especially since it's mainly a tech or a heavily tech audience listening, the thing that I think is a problem worth discussing, maybe we can have another live at some point, is
yes.
the improper use of technology to solve problems that shouldn't be there to begin with. So in other words, what I see in banking is, a fair amount of artificial intelligence being the savior that's going to, make the work much more efficient. But using artificial intelligence to do work that shouldn't be done is a complete waste of resources. And the same is true of workflow systems. automating workflow is very honorable and it's very helpful. But automating work that shouldn't be there in the first place is, again, the misuse of resources and brain power and all those things. So I think it's really important to approach work systems from what is the essential work that needs to even occur, and then how do we use technology to speed it up and to have good checks in place to get quality problems and all those things that technology is brilliant at doing. We do it together, but it's second. It's not the first step.
Right. Got it. Yes. Okay. So with that, let me ask you the final question for the day. So it's a big question. It's about macro value streams. Now the question is macro. Who is involved? So for everyone's benefit, Karen, could you just define what exactly macro value streaming means, and then what's the team involved in macro value streaming?
So macro, MACRO?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to something I mentioned a little bit earlier, where we do see a lot of value stream maps that are process maps. They're not value stream maps.
Okay.
Value stream is by definition a macro map. It's a high level view of the work system.
Right.
And it's used to make strategic, not tactical improvement decisions.
Right.
How are we going to flow the work more easily through this area? So, it may be removing the need for a backlog. Wow, like that's transformative. Like, why do we like backlogs? So it's thinking very innovatively, and that's why you use leaders on the team to help think through those higher level decisions on how work needs to flow.
Right. Great. I'm really happy about the discussion, because I managed to clarify a lot of doubts I had in terms of value stream mapping as well. So I'm sure the audience will definitely would have loved the discussion. So if you have any further questions, if you have any comments, put them in the chat, the comment section. So if you are watching, if you're someone watching offline, post live streaming, do mention that you're watching, and then any takeaways, do mention. So we would love to hear your feedback on the discussion as well, right? So with that, we are going to wrap up the discussion. So finally, Karen, the last thing that I want you to just tell me is this: if someone, any organization wants to go for value stream mapping, what's your final words? Is it something that every organization should be doing? And if so, what's your final take?
Yes, everyone should be looking at their value streams. It's a profound way to look at work, and it's systems thinking. It's really introducing systems thinking, and many organizations aren't even remotely familiar with that term, let alone able to do it. And so it's a great training ground to get people to start thinking systematically and not making micro improvements in silos that don't connect together to the larger whole. Remember, customers don't buy functions; they buy a completed service or good.
Love it. Love your final message. Yeah, so I recon what you just said, because even the modern the management leadership perspective, if the audience has read the book Management 3.0, it's exactly focusing on what Karen said, right? So in terms of managing the organizations, managing the people, you actually don't manage them. You don't manage anything other than the system, right? So the more focus we pay on the system and get the system refined, people will work perfectly, and the best results can be produced through such efforts. Yeah, so with that, let's conclude the discussion. I must thank you, Karen, for accepting my invite. We have never met. We have just communicated over LinkedIn, right? So, but you said yes, and came for this. It's really, really appreciated your efforts and your flexibility to accept this request, and more than all of it. So, what you shared is really, really important for every one of us. Yeah. So,
thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always, as I say, it's my privilege to have you in this show. Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, maybe we can have another chat. Maybe we can dig deeper into the value stream mapping, try to solve some critical problems that our audience have. Yeah. So with that,
that'd be great.
Yeah. So let's plan for that. With that, thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Everyone. Thank you.
Until we see you again.
Bye-bye.
May the force be with you. Cheers, Karen. Bye.
Thank you so much, Niroshan.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.